Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Today I wanted to do an extra video, mostly because I've had so many people over the last 2 to 3 days come to me to talk to me about this stuff in regards to the male contraceptive jab, and their take on their concerns about it, or their frustration with it, or their worry about the numbers because they just don't seem to add up, and so on and so forth. And so I thought I'd actually, as with my understanding averages video, I'd actually jump into this, do a little bit of reading and background on it, and actually see what's what with it. Because on a first glance, when I first came across this, I saw it at the end of last week, and I saw a BBC article that my girlfriend linked me, and it was very much a case of this is a thing that's being worked on, which I already knew about. I'd seen it in the past being reported on. They reached the end of their testing phase with these potential results, but there were still issues, and so they were doing what scientists do, and they were taking what they could from that information, moving on with that, and seeing what they could do with it to make it better, so as to not release an unfinished and unfully tested product onto the market, which could then cause potentially very long-term damaging effects. The job that scientists do. But then you had a few other news outlets picking it up and running with it and going, oh, 96% success rate, why aren't we just using it? And then you had especially there was an opinion piece, it was like an editorial in The Independent that I came across and that I had discussions about most of yesterday evening, even whilst I was doing other stuff. I had my friends and certain people also talking to me about it last night, in spite of the fact that other people had come to talk to me about it in a more kind of, can you offer some insight on this, earlier in the week, because of the amount of arguments and hate and upset that had been caused by all of this. And so then seeing this editorial, which a lot of people will just take as straight reporting, because unfortunately people tend not to pay attention to what is being said. If they agree with it, they agree with it. If they don't, then they don't. And in this case, it seemed to be an awful lot of women angry about the state of their chemical contraceptives, saying that for some reason, just because these scientists were doing their job, and seemingly because they also hadn't read all of the information around it, they had only read the headline, they were getting upset. And firstly, if you're going to be upset about something, at least do the reading about it first, so that you're aware, and so that you know whether or not you should be upset. That's part of that whole taking responsibility for your own emotions and your own actions kind of thing. But also, men and women are different. You cannot equate the two, especially in this particular way. This is the main huge difference between men and women, and as a result we work differently. If these scientists, who are dedicating their lives to science and to working on these issues, have moved back to a testing and planning and kind of analysis phase so that they can then proceed with it, then you should be happy about that. It means that they're doing their job, and I would imagine that it's not an entirely male team, and considering that some of the other arguments from this kind of mindset have been that there aren't enough women in science, and there's rampant misogyny everywhere and patriarchy and all that jazz. Well, then if these people on this team, who are also probably at least in some part female, as a team, are saying we're going to take it back to a phase where we can analyze it, see if we can work things around it, then maybe to promote people, the women that you want to get into STEM fields, going into STEM fields, when they do their job and when they say something, maybe you should listen. Just a thought. But anyway, let's get into this. And the first, I'm going to keep looking off to the side because I've got notes, and I've got the NHS write-ups on this and so on. I'll leave it in the the link to the male contraceptive jab right up from the NHS down in the description as well, so that you can take a look at it if you want to. But ultimately, looking at this, the first thing that everyone has been quoting is the 96% success rate. Well, firstly, that's not right. Because, firstly, 96% success rate, 95.9 in actual fact, per 100 continuing users. But the study was of 320 men overall. That, you know, they have deliberately slanted those numbers so that it sounds more preferable. The same way that when it comes to the side effects, which I'll get to later, and some of the negative sides, including failure rate where pregnancies occurred, they go a rate of 1.57 per 1,000 continuing users. In other words, they have shifted these numbers to one extent or another to appear more favourable than they are in regards to the desired effect, and less impactful than they are in the negatives. And this seems a little skew-if to me, but because, especially considering that you had less than, or about a third of 1,000 people in the actual study overall, then the 1,000 continuing users bit is I don't see any justification for that at all, because they're just projecting, and especially considering some of these results are so mixed, it's a weird one. But anyway, so what are the actual numbers? Well, there were 320 men in this study, and apparently, to begin with, something that was raised in a discussion I had last night, in this, it's said that they're tested for structure and sperm count and all this kind of thing, and most of this jab revolves around the effect on sperm count, more so than anything else, actual sperm production. But one of my friends came to me, or was discussing it with me, and said, but there's no mention of them being checked out for things like structural blockages in the man, let alone the sperm. Ignoring the sperm, structural blockages in the individual, or other potentially underlying issues. And you know, these men were also checked for STDs and whatever else as well. So I would like to, at the very least, give the scientists the benefit of the doubt that when they did their various tests on virility, structure, movement, and so on the sperm, they also, you know, checked where the sperm was coming from so that it wasn't biased. But that's a point that isn't clarified and is up in the air. So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for the moment, because that seems to be suggested when they in this write-up, when it says that, you know, they check these men over and so on. But you know, there's no specifics, so, you know, unfortunate, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, because one would hope that if they're doing good science to one extent or another, then they would have done the full slew of checks that they could have done at the beginning. But anyway, yes, so that comes to 320 men were accepted for this, of which, and now here's part of the kicker, of which only 274 achieved the required suppression of sperm count, which is where the 95.9% per 100 users comes from in regards to suppression. They're saying that they did a great job, when actually, of their full sample, of their full test lot that they started this whole thing with, who were under the effects of this jab for 24 weeks, 15% of them it just didn't work for. Okay, in which case that lowers the overall success, just in terms of actual usage, to somewhere around 85%. There, I think it's like 85.62 or something like that, 63. But then moving on from that, you've got the actual effectiveness over the whole study was somewhere in the region of about 81.25%, which is much, much lower. Meaning that only you had 266 of the 320 men actually had the desired a full suppressed sperm count, because I believe it's like 8 of them, or it had the full desired effect, because you had 8 of the men pull out during the before the testing phase, despite their so it worked for them in terms of the suppression, but they pulled out, and as a result, they for various reasons that are their own. In which case, obviously, something about the study was not comfortable for them. It did not work for them, and they had moved on to one degree or another. I'm not going to start trying to guess what their reasons were, but what it comes down to is those people were not comfortable continuing, and they removed themselves. Fair dues. In which case, though, then that brings us down to the 266 from 274, that this is actually working for, that we're getting the desired effect in regards to suppression, and those people remain functioning. Apart from then, the suppression fails on 6 of the individuals. So you've got 6 people who, during the testing phase of this, which went on for a year, had their sperm count jump right back up. And their body adjusted to it, and it just stopped working. So it only worked for a very small period of time, and then they just shrugged it off. And as a result, you've got 260 out of the 320 that it actually had some kind of full effect for, in regards to it working. Yeah, in regards to it lowering the sperm count enough to count it as a win, or to count it as a success in regards to the effect. And also the men were still functioning to one degree or another, and able to continue. In which case, that 260 over 320 multiplied by 100, that gives us the percentage. And so you've got, which is, yeah, as I said, 81.25. I was just checking my working there. I was just making sure. But then during that time, you still had another couple of sets of issues, including you had, even though the drug had worked exactly as it was supposed to have worked, you still had 4 pregnancies, 3 of which occurred when the sperm count should have been too low for it to happen. So of the 260 people, you know, you've got 4 out of 260, which then comes to like another like 1.5% of those individuals overall where it was failing, in which case I can give them the 1.7% fail rate to one degree or another. That's fair enough. But it's still a case of it. Those still happened not when the drug had failed completely, but when the drug was working as expected, and it still didn't work. But hey, that happens. It still happens with all manner of different forms of contraception every so often anyway. But then moving on to after the study, you had 14 men who it had worked for from the 260 men from the study that then didn't have their fertility recover during the recovery period allotted, and were left infertile to one degree or another, which is a permanently damaging thing, which is unfortunate. In the study then also, as negative side effects, you had 1,491 side effects that were reported, over a third of which were discounted as as unrelated, as non-factors. But here's the thing, that still leaves, let's say that they're going, oh, well, over a third. Okay, well, it's obviously under a half, because that's what you've said. So let's say that it's a bit more than a third. Yeah? That still leaves 2/3 of the effects, which comes to somewhere in the region of somewhere around 984 different possible side effects if you were taking it as exact thirds. So let's say it's between 800 and 900 different side effects that were potentially directly attributed to the drug. And these are all manner of side effects, I would imagine. But the most frequent ones, and these are some of the ones that have people ranting and raving, were acne, which was reported by 46% of the men, so nearly half of them. The increased interest in sex at 38%, part of me thinks that that's at least somewhat psychosomatic. If you know that you can go and have sex and you've not got as much to worry about because you've been given this new chemical that sounds great, then what it comes down to is, you're probably going to want to enjoy that whilst you can. So there may be a difference as well because the jab included testosterone rather, but it still comes down to the fact that there was an odd effect there. But then 23%, so nearly a quarter, are seeing pain at the injection site. 17%, nearly 20%, seeing emotional disorder, which includes mood swings and depression and whatever else. And this is the thing, you've got a lot of women going that this, that happens, mood swings and whatever, that happens when you're on various forms of female hormonal contraception as well. It's like, yes, but here's a slight difference. When you've got men who don't have this monthly cycle, who don't have this emotional distress as just part of potentially their more natural ups and downs, it can be incredibly disconcerting. And then also adding that this has happened to a fifth of the individuals, or nearly a fifth of the individuals who are taking part in this, and male suicide makes up somewhere in the region, at the very least in the UK, about 75-ish% of all suicides. Do you really want to add people who are trying to do a good thing in taking responsibility for their sexual habits and reproduction, then also hitting these levels and potentially adding to that number? There are various other factors involved in this due to the differences in psychology, due to the differences in chemistry, that may make that 20 odd percent or 17% potentially far more impactful than some of the mood swings and things seen from other drugs. All it says is emotional disorder, and depression and mood swings have been mentioned, but that doesn't give us the substantial potential kind of variance between these things being displayed and expressed. And then you've got muscle aches in at about 16%. But so taking a look at this in summary, with half of the men noting at least some of the most frequent side effects, and the injections initially only really working for 80-ish% of men instead of otherwise, when most female contraceptives as well, if we're doing the whole comparing thing, which I don't think is fair, but which has been brought up an awful lot, most female contraceptives are still in the 90s in regards to success, and condoms are still also in the 90s in regards to success rate. So having a contraceptive that drops quite substantially by a full 10% in terms of actually even affecting the person that's taking the medication, you could be potentially taking it and it wouldn't do anything to your sperm count, but would cause you depression. And as a result, you don't. That's a big factor in this, because the numbers that were thrown out initially are slightly slanted. And then when you've got kind of 4% of the entire study and about 5% of the 81.5% that the drug actually worked on being left infertile, through their recovery period and after the recovery period, that's not good. That's not a great thing. And then also, as said, with the 800 to 900 other side effects that haven't yet fully been explained, or that may very well have very odd impacts on how this drug is developed. That's another big factor that's being worked out, because this is a trial jab. It's a part of a study. That it's not saying that it won't eventually be a plausible and workable thing, but you cannot complain about, we have made X amount of progress, but there are still issues that still need to be worked out. At the very least, you should be reading the article and taking that on board, or reading the reports and taking that on board, so that then when you do get upset or criticise, at least you're informed well enough so that you're criticising and upset about the right things. But then some of the other factors, the conclusion of the trial the conclusion was that the trial would end due to these results and additional factors, including, firstly, that all men needed to be heavily monitored throughout, and it was something that they just couldn't be left alone with. It couldn't be easily self-administered, it couldn't be easily worked with, and the sperm count was something that needed to be monitored. I believe it was every 2 weeks or so that they had to provide. Let me see. Yeah, they needed to give regular semen samples so that they could actually ensure that it was working regularly and as it should do. In which case, it's not a case of getting a jab and then being left alone. You'd still have to go back to a doctor every 2 weeks if it was released in its current state. And then in the 3 to 4 pregnancies that occurred, where the men, 3 of the 4 pregnancies rather that occurred, the men in question were below the sperm threshold, meaning that they shouldn't have been able to. They were, for the purposes of the study, they were technically infertile, but it still didn't work. The pregnancy still occurred, and there's no two ways about that. That's still a thing that's a substantial negative. The rate of infertility was very high, and as a result was deemed potentially unduly damaging. And then the mass of additional side effects, as I said, we'll go back. We'll come back to this again. They needed closer examination, so on. And then finally, the rate of side effects occurring was very high, and with the especially considering it was a small sample size, almost every single one of them experienced some side effect, and with the only one of the frequent side effects being taken as a potential psychosomatic one being the increased interest in sex. It's not like you'll read the write-ups for the female contraceptive jab, for instance, and it will be some women get X, Y, and Z. In this case, almost every single individual in that study, some with overlapping side effects and symptoms, experienced some negative directly from this. That can't really be said as easily for female contraception, and especially considering that this is an injection, it should be contrasted with the female jab and shouldn't be contrasted with things like the pill or the implant or any of the other various forms of contraception. It's a very specific form. Now, the way that I've taken to describing this and trying to help people understand it over the last few days, because when I was doing my A levels, I did biology. I've always been very interested in the biological side of things. Very much one of my favourite subjects, and as a result, I took on, granted a while ago, but I took on a lot of information about the human reproductive cycle because it was one of the core things that we were taught at A level. And so here's the thing. If you're looking at the female reproductive kind of hormone cycle, you've got 4 hormones and they rotate throughout a month, hence women getting their period. As a result, their body is always in some kind of hormonal flux. Now, as a result, it's easier to try and suspend that cycle at one point by emulating the chemical conditions in that spot. Are there side effects? Are there things that your body is being held in stasis for a time? Is it going to work for everybody? No, but is it a thing that can be done fairly succinctly and easily? Yeah, to a degree, because it's just a case of the already changing chemical levels being held in one particular state. Men, on the other hand, have very much a yearly cycle which is barely noticeable because the variance is much, much smaller. And I realise that there are probably going to be some people that come out to me and go, but it's huge. Well, yeah, but in terms of the basic concentrations in the bloodstream, maybe, but in regards to the actual effects thereof, not so much. I mean, as I've mentioned in other videos, if you take it back to the men as hunter kind of tribal idea, then ultimately a hunter that has to, for a certain period of time during a month or during a hunt, has to just stop due to their body chemistry going crazy, then they're not going to be a particularly effective hunter. If you have everyone doing that regularly, then you're not going to get as much food. People are going to die out. You know, men are designed for a very specific, consistent function, and as a result, that's where their hormone cycle comes from, and that's where the female hormone cycle comes from. You know, it's all the way in which we evolved to suit the purposes that we required to survive. And as a result, though, if you think about it like this, if the male reproductive cycle and the female reproductive cycle are lengths of material, yeah? So you've got the female reproductive cycle is a piece of fabric or rubber or something that's more malleable. And so as a result, you know, you can wave it around and it will change and it will flop around, and you can make it inconsistent. You can have one part higher than another part, and you can wrap it around in itself, and you can try and hold one piece up and the rest of it will drop down. And as a result, that's what's happening when you're taking female hormonal contraception in a very, very simple way. And as a result, because it's so malleable and you can hold one point up above the rest and you can hold it in that state and it will remain there to one extent or another, then that means that it's just easier to work with, it's easier to do it. Whereas in the case, especially if the individuals that have been left completely infertile, you know, so far from this particular treatment, the male reproductive cycle is very much a length made of, say, wood, where it's not particularly malleable, it's quite hard, and then if you really try to stress it and bend it, or create a gap in it, or create a rise or a lowering in it of a greater extent so that you get an effect like this, then it snaps and it breaks, and then it's very, very hard to put back together again. And this is what's happened in regards to the people who the 14 men who were left without sufficient recovery of fertility. You know, you're not getting the same bounce back because the material that they are made from doesn't bounce. Now, I've seen people, especially in the editorial from the Independent, going, "Oh, but the male system is so much simpler. The male system has fewer moving parts, maybe, but that doesn't mean it's simpler. Fewer moving parts means that it's harder to alter." You know, there are that is the unfortunate thing about this, and it's when you're saying, oh, it favours men, it's you know, these issues haven't been fixed in one regard or another for women, and it's only because it's happening to men that this study is stopped and it's not being continued and it's being taken back to whatever other stage for development. You really think that men don't want this? You know, you're saying that a guy could have sex and not worry about condoms unless they're worried about disease, yeah? You're saying that they wouldn't have to worry about pregnancy and they wouldn't have to worry about their other half not taking their pill or anything like that. It would be completely within their control, and you're saying that they wouldn't want that. If you're saying that, then, you know, I can't help but wonder, why is it that women wanted control over their fertility? Because exactly the same reasons apply to why men want control over their fertility. It's all the same reasons. It's you can't start suggesting that this study is benefiting men when men want this as much as you guys wanted contraception previously. You know, it's a very straightforward and simple thing. You know, would I personally take it at the moment? Hell no, because I can see the information there and I can see the workings in and out, and the numbers aren't lying to me that potentially it wouldn't work for me. I'd get a whole load of horrible side effects, and potentially I'd be infertile for the rest of my life, or at least for a substantial period after the fact. And it's like, you know, looking at it now, no, I wouldn't take it. Would I take it in the future? If the studies and if all of the information supported the fact that it was as safe or safer than either the worst form of female contraception. Maybe. If it was as safe as some of the better forms of female contraception, then yeah, I may very well consider it. But, looking at this information, even with the number of people that they then surveyed from this group that would they use it again afterwards, you had a drop off in the number of people that said yes. You still had a lot of people saying yes, but whether or not that's because they felt that that it was worth it, or that they genuinely didn't care for having children, and so the infertility wasn't a problem to them, or any of those other potential factors. Again, this is a sample of 320 people. It's not representative of taking it out and throwing it out into the world, because also you have to think about the number of people that this number of people that they recruited. Where did they come from? What did they do? We don't know who these people are. All we know is that they had penises and they had partners, and that they had these injections, progesterone and testosterone, stuck into their backsides. That's all we know. There's no other context to it. Was the likelihood of them coming and saying yes, we'd continue to use it, high anyway at the beginning of the study, based on their opinions and thoughts and the way that they wanted it to work in the first place? How biased were they in regards to which direction? I wouldn't I wouldn't try and use, if I was trying to defend this, I wouldn't try and use that figure of X number of people said that they would come back and use it from this study, purely because the study doesn't mention anything about who these people were beforehand, apart from they were healthy, had penises, had partners, and so on. And mental health was also included in this, so the emotional disorders and depression and all the rest of it is more pronounced, because these people were in theory completely mentally healthy beforehand. But anyway, I hope that this has maybe cleared up a bit, because the numbers were very skewed one way or the other in the various headlines and articles, because if you actually look at the information, I mean, yes, I took this information from the NHS write-up on it, and not from the directly from the study itself. But assuming that the NHS has done its job and it's actually reporting on it properly as an actual report on health and the health impacts of this potential thing that may be here in the future, then I'm willing to trust them on that, at least. So what it comes down to is this injection has potential, but is nowhere near finished yet. The negatives at the moment, as has been stated, are somewhat disproportionate, even in comparison to the worst form of female contraception at the moment, which I have on good authority is the contraceptive injection. And so what it comes down to is that, one of the reasons though why there are so many forms of female contraception, for the women that are complaining and getting upset by this, the reason why you have so many different forms of contraception, both chemical and to a degree non-chemical, it ultimately comes down to the fact that they're not only used for contraception, they're used to regulate your period and all manner of other discomfort from that. And yes, they do have a major role in contraception, but the thing with this is, why wouldn't you want that? That gives you an element of control over what happens to you. That's why this is being done, this study, this work is being done in the first place, because men want the same control that we currently don't have. And so as a result, what it comes down to is the complaints that the system is favouring men are complete bollocks, and the reasons behind it, and the reasons behind the disparity between male contraception and female contraception, is because you're easier to work with as females you have more uses for it as for these treatments as females, and as a result, there's nothing really to complain about because they've not said that they're finished. They've said that they're continuing to work on it. Why would you, considering I'm assuming that you're wanting to have these treatments used with a partner, so that your partner becomes safe for you to have unprotected sex with, considering that seems to be the main cause of this, here's the question. If you're claiming that these are as bad as some of the contraceptives and things that you have access to, and you want to have this treatment used by your other half, or by significant other, or whoever it is, you're saying that you want those people to use this so that you don't have to, and yet you're saying that yours are so bad and that these are also bad, and so they should just get on with it and use it anyway, even though it's a potentially unsafe drug. If you care about these people, your significant other, your partner, whoever, that you want to actually use this drug to have sex with you, then why are you wishing such horrible symptoms on them? Why are you suggesting that they should put up with these? If you know how bad they are, and you know how bad they are even when you're not on contraception, because your body goes through the cycle every month where you bleed, where you get cramps and pains, where you have mood swings, and so on and so forth. And I'm obviously speaking in broad strokes here, but if you have these symptoms of various sorts, to one extent or another anyway, and then your contraception methods, to one extent or another, either exaggerate them or change them in some way, then why aren't you being a little bit more empathetic for the individuals who went through this study, who have lost their fertility, who've had horrible things happen to them, and who still have potentially somewhere between 800 and 900 other side effects that haven't been fully classified and worked out yet, or at least haven't been included in this? Why is it that you want those people that you seemingly care about, because you want to have sex with them, deal with them in that way, why is it that you want them to suffer? But anyway, tell me what you guys think. Is this, should we take heed of the numbers and realise that these people are just doing their jobs, and that's why the study didn't continue? And as a result, taking into account the fact that newspapers, a lot of them are not scientists, do not obviously in the editorial from the Independent, they didn't read the sodding thing, the links that they put in their own article, all of this information that comes straight forward, if you just bother to read it, that then if you just do a little bit of like high school maths, basic calculating of percentages, you get to understand the impact of this. I mean, Christ, the number of people in this country who did GCSE maths is quite substantial, or O-level maths for the older generation. This stuff and analysing information and comprehend, like number comprehension, all that kind of stuff, is all covered at the very least at GCSE, towards the end of high school. It's something that you require for getting most jobs. So how is it that people aren't able to just read and understand the numbers here, instead of just knee-jerk reaction, flying off the handle and complaining and screaming? I can't help but feel that there's an awful lot more of a political agenda to the complaints than just, oh, well, we want it now. Well, yeah, fine, you might want it now, but I can almost guarantee you the men who would be affected by this want it more. Because it's terrifying for a guy to not have control over that and have beyond a condom, which can still break, which can still have issues with it, which can still fail to one degree or another. It is a much more concerning thing for a guy, because if a pregnancy happens, then all of the control over that entire situation to one degree or another falls on the woman. And so that can be as terrifying for a guy as it is for a girl, to the thought of being pregnant is for a girl. It's not fun for anybody. And so they're trying to improve, these scientists, these researchers, the people doing this study are trying to improve that for everybody, so that men don't have to worry, so that women don't have less to worry about, and as a result, it's easier for everyone. Stop complaining. Stop thrusting your political agenda onto these things. Stop just hating people for the sake of hating them, and read, understand. It's not difficult. It's really simple. If you went to school, which I would assume you have if you're writing for a national newspaper, then this shouldn't. It boggles the mind that you can write these articles and get this kind of recognition without actually being able to read an article and understand numbers. But anyway, considering this is the second kind of video like this that I've done in regards to kind of taking a look at bullshit or trying to help people understand things, let me know kind of just by dropping a like on this video whether or not you'd like me to do a series of these where I try and find stuff that people are having issues with, where you guys can tell me what you guys are having issues with, and then I will look into it on your behalf and try and break it down and explain it as best I can. Please let me know just by dropping a like there. Otherwise, in the comments, what do you guys think about this? Were you behind it? Do you think that it's good that they're continuing the development process? Are you one of these people that's been complaining about how the effects are the same? Why is it that you're complaining? They're looking to better this, and if you're really saying that, oh well, the betterment of that, it's only working for the betterment of men, well, surely if you're following the same thinking that men got voting rights and so on and so forth first, and then campaigning got it for women, then what, are you suggesting that if this treatment got developed to the extent that it was basically side effectless, you're saying that wouldn't then be carried across to women, considering that this is basically the female contraceptive injection re-engineered for men? We're getting this after you. It's all based off stuff to one extent or another that was worked out for you guys first. So I still don't understand where the complaints come from, unless you're literally doing it from an ideological and political point, in which case stop it, that's bad. But anyway, otherwise, thank you very much guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this bonus video for today, and please subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.